The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell starts right now. Hey, Lawrence.
Hey, Jen. You know, I've never heard Ken Paxton give a speech before tonight. I listened to his victory speech, and it was just the flattest public speaking I've seen in quite a while. He spent, it seemed to me, most of the time talking about our first guest tonight, James Tallarico. We're going to show viewers exactly what he said about James Tallarico. James Tallarico, if he hasn't heard it already, is going to hear it on this program. What Ken Paxton said about him, and this will be the first place where James Tallarico gets a chance to respond to Ken Paxton tonight. This really will be, in this hour, the campaign officially underway.
The general election is launching. This race could determine control of the Senate. So I can't wait to hear what he has to say.
General election in Texas underway right now at this hour.
Exactly.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thank you. Well, Texas Senator Lloyd Bentsen was one of the very few politicians in American history, and the only one who I can personally remember, who won and lost an election on the same night. In 1988, Lloyd Bentsen appeared on the ballot in all 50 states as the Democratic candidate for Vice President of the United States. And at the same time, on the Texas ballot, Lloyd Bentsen appeared as a candidate for re-election to the United States Senate in Texas. The presidential ticket of Michael Dukakis and Lloyd Bentsen got 43% of the vote in Texas in 1988. And at the same time, the same night, Democratic Senator Lloyd Bentsen got 59% of the vote in his re-election campaign for Senate, thereby making Lloyd Bentsen the last Democrat to win a United States Senate election in the state of Texas. And the next year, James Tallarico was born. He is now the Democratic candidate for Senate in Texas, trying to do something that hasn't happened literally in his lifetime: win a Texas Senate seat for the Democrats. The Texas law that allowed Lloyd Bentsen's name to appear on the ballot twice at the same time for two different offices was written by a Democratic state legislature and signed into law by a Democratic governor so that Lyndon Johnson, the majority leader of the United States Senate at the time, could appear on the Texas ballot for two different offices in 1960. And they were the same offices that Lloyd Bentsen appeared on the ballot for. On election night in 1960, appearing on the ballot with Lyndon Johnson as his running mate, John Kennedy won the presidential vote in Texas with 50.5% of the vote, while at the very same time, Lyndon Johnson won his re-election to his Senate seat by 58% of the vote. When Lyndon Johnson moved up to the vice presidency, the Democratic governor then appointed a Democratic senator to take Lyndon Johnson's place. And for some in the Democratic Party, that now distant dream of Democrats winning in Texas has never died. And tonight, James Tallarico might be the best chance the Democrats have had to win a Senate seat in Texas in 38 years. Some polls earlier this year have shown James Tallarico leading both of the then Republican candidates who faced off tonight. And now we know the Republican candidate will be Texas State Attorney General Ken Paxton, who was endorsed by Donald Trump. And joining us now, has been covering the election results in Texas tonight, MS Now's Ali Velshi. Ali, what's the latest? What's happening in some of those other Democratic primaries?
Well, Talarico was a strong candidate to start with, got a little stronger tonight with 63% of the vote. Ken Paxton, as you have said, is going to be the Republican candidate for Senate in Texas. That's going to be very complicating for a lot of Republicans, moderates, and independents in Texas who may not vote for Talarico, but they may sit home and not vote for Ken Paxton. A couple other races I just want to tell you about. The Attorney General GOP race has been called in favor of Mays Middleton. He was running against the Republican member of the House, Chip Roy. That one's been won. And I know you're going to be talking to James Talarico in a couple of moments. I want to take you back to the March primary that he won. Here's what's got to happen with James Talarico in order to win the state. A lot of things have to happen, but there are a few counties down in the bottom of Texas. These are the Rio Grande Valley counties. It's representative of things that go on around here, but heavily Latino, Hispanic votes that had gone toward Donald Trump and have started moving back toward Republicans. If James Talarico can appeal to that demographic, that'll be good. Then the San Antonio, Austin column, where he needs to do well. The area around Houston, where actually he lost to Jasmine Crockett, but a lot of Democratic votes in that area that Talarico's got to succeed in converting over to Talarico votes. And then the Fort Worth, Dallas Metroplex and the counties around there. Again, Jasmine Crockett, that's her backyard. That's where she's from. She did very well in these districts. But again, those were Democratic votes. And remember, more Democrats showed up on that March 3rd primary than Republicans did. So there are, obviously you got to win all over the state. But if James Talarico can win with high margins in these particular areas, this will stand him in good stead. The complicating factor now, perhaps in his favor, is that Ken Paxton is the Republican nominee. That's fantastic for Donald Trump. That's fantastic for the MAGA base. It may not be fantastic for Texans in general and Texas Republicans in particular.
Ali Velshi, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
And leading off our election coverage tonight is Texas State Representative James Talarico. He is the Democratic nominee for United States Senate in Texas. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. This is the first time you've joined us where you know who you'll be running against in November. Is this the campaign you wanted, Talarico versus Paxton? Is this the opponent you wanted out of this Republican primary?
Well, Ken Paxton embodies the broken political system that we're running against. He is the most corrupt politician in America. 3 years ago tomorrow, he was impeached by his own party for using his public office, his position of public trust, to enrich himself and his donors at our expense. And that is exactly the problem in our politics. It's puppet politicians who serve themselves and their billionaire mega donors instead of serving us. It's why we can't afford anything. It's why we can't get ahead no matter how hard we work. The system is rigged by corrupt politicians like Ken Paxton. And so it's going to be all of us. It's going to be Democrats, independents, and Republicans. It's going to be urban Texans, rural Texans, suburban Texans. It's going to be all of us coming together, the people versus Ken Paxton.
Let's listen to what Ken Paxton had to say about you tonight. And I have to tell you, I don't know if you've heard this already, but he spent a good deal of his victory speech tonight talking just about you. Here's what he had to say about you.
My opponent is the most extreme radical the Democrats have ever nominated. He's even running a vegan campaign, whatever that is. He goes by a few names that you may all have heard of. Some people know him as Tofu Talarico. Some people call him Six-Gender Jimmy. I've even heard some people call him James Talarico. And others refer to him simply as Low T Talarico. But no matter what you call him, let me tell you this. James Talarico is a threat to everything we hold dear in this state and in this country. He's a threat to our security and our safety. He wants open borders and even said a welcome mat should be at our southern border. He's a threat to our children. He wants boys and girls sports, gender mutilation surgery performed on kids. And when asked what he loved outside of his family and friends, you heard what Brandon Gill said, his first answer was trans kids. That's weird, and that's a radical guy. He's a threat to our prosperity and Texas economy. He said you can't be a Christian if you support the oil and gas industries. He wants to raise your taxes, and he won't do a single thing to lower costs for you and your family. And finally, he's a threat to our very way of life and our values. I mean, he's a vegan who thinks God is non-binary and that there's actually 6 biological sexes. It's hard to imagine someone more radical than that. No matter what he says or how much he raises, the reality is that James Tallarico is going to be nothing more than a Texas-based puppet for Chuck Schumer and the National Democrats.
That is it. That is, as of tonight, the Paxton campaign against you. What is your equal time response to that?
Well, Ken Paxton is morally unfit for office. He'll lie to you with a straight face. He's failed the character test. He's the most corrupt attorney general of our lifetime, and he puts the interests of himself over the laws of Texas. Those aren't my words. Those are the words of Ken Paxton's fellow Republicans. This November, working Texans, Democrats, independents, and Republicans alike are going to come together to defeat the most corrupt politician in America and the broken political system that he represents.
So he's going after you in very personal terms. He's calling you, he's got names for you that we just heard. I don't want to repeat some of those. But obviously, he's going to spend a great deal of his time talking about you and transgender issues and children. What do you want Texas voters to understand about that?
Well, this is how puppet politicians like Ken Paxton stay in power. You know, he's spent his entire career selling us out for his donors. And that, I think, is going to be apparent to Texans over the course of this race. And so the only way he's going to hold on to power is through distraction and division. This is the oldest strategy in the world, divide and conquer. They divide us by party, by race, by gender, by religion, by all this culture war stuff. So we don't notice that they're picking our pockets, that they are closing our public schools all over Texas. They are gutting our healthcare, raising our premiums for Texans all over the state. And they are raising taxes on all of us while they cut taxes for themselves. And so I think Texans see through this game. They realize that we're being pitted against each other with these old, tired culture war fights so that corrupt politicians like Ken Paxton can hold on to power and continue to enrich themselves and their billionaire mega donors.
What about Texas voters who want to know from you on this particular issue? Is Ken Paxton telling the truth about you in relation to these issues, especially involving what he was just talking about there, transgender issues involving children?
No, Ken Paxton is clipping comments, taking them out of context to try to paint a picture, trying to paint me as someone I'm not. You know, Ken Paxton has a criminal record. I have a legislative record over 4 terms in the Texas House of Representatives, where I've brought Democrats and Republicans together to pass more than 60 bipartisan bills to cut property taxes, to raise teacher pay, to lower the cost of housing, prescription drugs, and childcare across Texas. And I'm going to put that record up against Ken Paxton's criminal record any day of the week, twice on Sunday. I've called out the extremes in both parties, on the right and the left. You know, I've called out Ken Paxton for his blatant illegal corruption, but I also called out President Biden when he failed to secure our southern border. So I'm not interested in going to Washington, D.C. to serve one political party. I'm going to Washington, D.C. to serve the people of Texas. That's the exact opposite of what Ken Paxton does. He serves himself and his billionaire mega donors at the expense of the people of this state.
You just heard Ken Paxton say that you are for open borders. What's your response to that?
I just told you that they were, clipping things that I've said. This is a perfect example because I said our southern border should be like our front porch. There should be a welcome mat and a lock on the door, meaning we can welcome immigrants who want to live the American dream, who want to make us richer and stronger in the process, and secure the border and keep out people who mean to do us harm. We can do both of those things at the same time. It's puppet politicians like Ken Paxton who want to grandstand on this issue of immigration, who want to make people afraid. That's why he's cutting my comments in half, because he wants to paint a picture He wants to hold on to power despite his career of corruption. So we're going to keep telling the truth over the course of this campaign. And I think Texans will know who's actually fighting for them, who's fighting to lower their costs, who's fighting corruption, and it's not Ken Paxton.
It's very clear that he's going to follow the Donald Trump model in so many ways, including, by the way, his own ethical behavior, according to the public record. But you're going to be subjected to a number of nasty names. And we just heard a couple of them there that he tried out tonight. He'll be trying out more of those. And I'm sure people out there around the country are wondering, how are you going to counter that? How are you going to fight back against that? Because they've seen Donald Trump use that kind of technique successfully, especially in states with a lot of Republican voters. And as we know, Texas is one of those states with a lot of Republican voters who apparently respond to that kind of name calling and insult.
Well, you know, I've gone to every corner of Texas already over the course of this campaign, from Beaumont to El Paso, from Amarillo to Brownsville, and everywhere in between. And I can't tell you the number of people who come up to me at the end of these events and whisper, "I'm not a Democrat," like they're in the witness protection program, including a lot of people who voted for President Trump in 2024. They voted for him because they thought he was going to lower costs. They thought he was going to drain the swamp. They thought he was going to end the forever wars. They thought he was going to release the Epstein files. But just 1 year into this administration, they've seen him do the exact opposite. They've seen him raise prices through his crazy tariffs. They've seen him grow the swamp with unprecedented corruption. They've seen him start new forever wars, including the latest war in Iran. And they saw him do everything to prevent the release of the Epstein files. And so a lot of the president's supporters in Texas are feeling disillusioned. They're feeling disillusioned with this extremism and this corruption that is embodied by politicians like Ken Paxton. And so we have a real opportunity to build a big coalition of Democrats, independents, and Republicans who are fed up with this extremism and this corruption. That's exactly how I flipped a Trump district in Williamson County, Texas, when I first got elected to the state house. It was by building that big coalition, that big tent. And this politics of name calling, of trolling and owning, that politics has a record low approval rating in this country, including in Texas. Those nicknames don't lower your grocery bills. They don't lower the price of gas. They don't lower the cost of housing and childcare and prescription drugs and insurance. It doesn't actually improve people's lives. And so I think in this election, what you're going to see is a deep hunger for servant leaders who are actually going to deliver for working Texans, going to make their lives easier and better and less stressful, rather than enriching themselves and their billionaire mega donors.
I want to go to one of the issues you would face as a United States Senator now in the Senate, and that is a vote on a war powers resolution which would limit Donald Trump's ability to continue his war in Iran. How would you vote on that?
I would vote to limit these presidential powers. I would vote to end this disastrous war in Iran as quickly as possible. You know, as a millennial, I saw how military disasters like the Iraq War robbed this nation of young lives, of billions of dollars, and of our moral standing around the world. And I think this administration is making the exact same mistakes in Iran. And so I think we need to bring this war to an end. We got to start lowering the price of gas for working Texans who are already feeling squeezed. And we got to get our foreign policy back to some kind of sanity.
James Talarico, please stay with us. We're going to squeeze in a commercial break here. When we come back, I want to show some of the campaign ads that already have run against your opponent and that he survived, which are kind of, it's inconceivable that a candidate possibly in any other state could have survived what he's already survived as a candidate. James Talarico, please stay with us. We'll be right back. And we're back with Texas Democratic candidate for Senate, James Talarico. Let's look at some of the TV ads I know you've seen, because everyone in Texas has seen them. But these are the TV ads that Republicans ran against Ken Paxton, your new Republican opponent, and he survived these ads. Let's watch this.
It's voting time, so let's cut through the bullshit. Crooked Ken Paxton cheated on his wife. She's divorcing him on biblical grounds. So now Paxton's wrecking another home, sleeping around with a married mother of 7. While in office, Ken Paxton's net worth increased by up to 7,000%. How the hell is that even possible? Crooked Ken is now worth up to $12 million. He owns 11 homes, claiming 3 of them as his primary residence. Well, we know Ken Paxton cheats. Just ask the mother of his children.
Why does Ken Paxton go easy on child predators? A Waco attorney, Adam Hoffman, sexually abused a child for 3 years, and Paxton gutted the case, offering him just a slap on the wrist.
Are those important issues in this campaign?
Absolutely. There is no more important issue than protecting our children. And the fact that Ken Paxton would let a known predator back out on the streets, to me, is unconscionable. And it's going to be part of our prosecution of Ken Paxton in the months ahead. Texans will understand the choice that's before them, the choice of the most corrupt politician in America and a candidate who is running on trying to lower costs and clean up corruption. There's going to be a contrast between service and selfishness. And I look forward to making that case to the people of Texas.
Do you, based on everything you've seen, understand, can you describe how Ken Paxton so massively increased his net worth on a government salary?
I think we're going to have plenty of time in the weeks and months ahead to explain to Texans exactly how that's possible. Some of it is already known. You know, Ken Paxton was indicted for fraud. He was impeached for bribery. He has shown over and over again that he's only concerned about himself and that he's willing to use his position of public trust, his public office, to enrich himself at our expense. And again, Ken Paxton owns 11 homes while we can't afford one. Ken Paxton's net worth went up by 7,000% while our pay has been stagnant. So this is going to be the fight before us, because this is not just about Ken Paxton. It's about the corrupt system that he embodies, that he represents. If we can defeat the most corrupt politician in America in this year, in this race, in this state, then we can defeat this entire corrupt system. And if people watching are ready to join the movement that we're building, I hope they'll go to jamestalarico.com, sign up to volunteer, or sign up to donate, because we're going to need everybody if we're going to defeat the most corrupt politician in America.
There's a University of Texas poll from April, now outdated, but poll in April, Talarico versus Paxton, just isolated the two of you, and it had you running at 42 and Ken Paxton then running at 34. Now he's a winner of the Republican nomination. Now he has Donald Trump's endorsement, so we don't know what that would mean to that polling now. On the issue that we just discussed before the commercial break, Donald Trump's war in Iran, the University of Texas poll showed in Texas, 49% disapprove, 37% approve. So that your position obviously is the winning position, as it were, in that particular poll, and the winning position with Texas voters. How important do you think that issue, that the war in Iran, is going to be between now and November?
I think it's going to be a very important issue. You know, Texans are feeling the pain at the pump, and it's because of this disastrous war in Iran. You know, I put forward a proposal to suspend the federal gas tax, which would lower gas prices by 18 cents a gallon immediately. I've also proposed suspending the federal diesel tax, because When the price of diesel goes up, the price of everything goes up, because that's how all of our goods are shipped and how they're transported. And right after I did that, President Trump came out in support of suspending those 2 federal taxes. And so I think what Texans are looking for are leaders who are going to fight for them, who are going to focus on reducing costs, focus on unrigging this economy so that it works for regular people again. And that's what we're going to be focused on for the rest of this campaign. Ken Paxton embodies this corrupt, rigged system, and we're going to build a movement to unrig it on behalf of the people of Texas.
You're going to have to get Lloyd Benson's old seat on the Senate Finance Committee to be in a strong position to get those fuel taxes suspended. That's where the action is on that one.
That's right.
As you know, and I'm sure you know, and I'm sure you've talked to them, there are some John Cornyn voters out there tonight who are gravely disappointed and would have a difficult time trying to cast a vote for Ken Paxton in November, but they are Republicans and they vote Republican. What do you have to say to those Cornyn voters tonight who are so disappointed with this outcome on the Republican side in Texas tonight?
Well, first, I want to thank Senator Cornyn for his many years representing the state of Texas in our nation's capital. He and I don't agree on everything, but we both still believe in public service. The idea that these positions of public trust are meant to be a service to our constituents. And so to Senator Cornyn's supporters, I know you're feeling disappointed tonight, but I want you to know that you have a place in our campaign. This movement we're building is bigger than any political party. It's bigger than partisanship. It's about service versus selfishness. It is about serving the people of this state, improving people's lives through public policy. And so I would welcome any of the senator's supporters to join us this evening as we embark on this journey to take back our state and take back our country from corrupt politicians like Ken Paxton.
You know, there are so many millions of voters around this country tonight in states that have never voted for Donald Trump. Big states, New York, California, Illinois, all over the country, Massachusetts and so forth, who are staring at Texas wondering how could they possibly choose Ken Paxton over John Cornyn. John Cornyn, a solid Republican who's done everything that solid Republicans do, a Trump-supporting Republican. Ken Paxton, indicted, impeached, caught having affairs, a stunning personal biography for a politician to have, and not just survive an election, but win big on the Republican side of the ballot in Texas tonight. There are people out there in the country staring at Texas, just wondering how that could possibly happen.
Well, I just want to remind those folks around the country that our campaign is leading in every public and private poll that we've seen against Ken Paxton. And so I think there's going to be a backlash to this extremism and this corruption that Ken Paxton embodies. I think you're going to see those old-fashioned values of honesty, integrity, and service make a comeback in this election, in this state, in this race. And I urge anyone watching to join us and help us make this possible, because this is not just about Texas. This is about whether or not we can transform this broken, corrupt political system. And it's going to take all of us joining together to make that possible. And so I feel confident. I feel it in my bones that we are going to win this race in Texas, and we're going to transform this broken system in this country.
James Tallarico, you joined us here on the program for the first time before you won the Democratic nomination. Then you joined us immediately after winning the Democratic nomination. But tonight feels like the first real night of this campaign. It is James Tallarico versus Ken Paxton in Texas. Thank you very much for starting off that campaign here tonight.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And coming up, will the defeated Texas Republican Senator John Cornyn become the next Republican senator who might vote against Donald Trump's war? That's next. Donald Trump did not attend his oldest son's second wedding this weekend in the Bahamas. Donald Trump's RSVP excuse for not attending his son's second wedding was that he had to stay in the White House and conduct telephone negotiations to end his war in Iran, which he very much failed to do. Yesterday at 8:23 a.m., Donald Trump posted this on social media: "Negotiations with the Islamic Republic of Iran are proceeding nicely!" And then U.S. Central Command put out this statement: U.S. forces conducted self-defense strikes in southern Iran today to protect our troops from threats posed by Iranian forces. Targets included missile launch sites and Iranian boats attempting to emplace mines. That's not the kind of thing that happens when peace negotiations are proceeding nicely, as Donald Trump would put it. The House of Representatives is now in recess, which the Speaker of the House started a bit early last week, to avoid a vote on Donald Trump's war, when the Speaker reportedly knew he did not have enough votes to win support for Donald Trump's war in the Republican-controlled House of Representatives. Joining us now is Congressman Adam Smith of state of Washington, is the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman Smith, might it be the case that the House and the Senate have to stay out of session in order to avoid Donald Trump losing a war powers vote in both the House and the Senate at this point?
Yeah, well, he already lost the one in the Senate. So in the House, it's a tougher call. The reason that they canceled the vote last week was because there were Republican members absent. I have not yet seen Republican House members that have changed their mind. They should, obviously. The war has been a disaster and is very unpopular. But House Republicans have been sycophants to Donald Trump, first, last, and always. So we're going to have to keep the pressure up to get them to change their mind. But we'll find out, because we're coming back into session a week from today, actually, and we'll have that vote. And it certainly should be a vote to end this war.
We just showed that poll with James Tallarico in Texas, University of Texas poll showing Texas opposition to Donald Trump's war in Iran. If that's where Texas is polling, then these Republicans are not going to be coming back from very many of their districts with an awful lot of support for this war.
Yeah, they're clearly on the wrong side of the issue. Now, I would like to ask that 37%, what exactly is it that they see here? This war has been manifestly a disaster for this country. The costs have been enormous. We've lost 14 service members, hundreds wounded, thousands of civilians killed. It's devastated the global economy, skyrocketed gas prices, amongst other things here locally. But then we've also not accomplished anything. Iran is now being run by someone more hardline and more extreme than when the war began. They're dug in deeper. We've accomplished none of our goals. And now the Strait of Hormuz is basically under Iranian control, and they're negotiating how much we and the rest of the world are going to have to pay them to open it up. Look, loyalty to Trump, I guess, explains that number. But I hope people get past loyalty to Trump and start looking at the impacts, the costs of Donald Trump's policies on the American people. And I think that pressure is mounting.
Congressman Adam Smith, thank you very much for joining our coverage tonight.
Thanks, Lawrence.
And coming up, President Obama was in Texas earlier this month to campaign for James Tallarico and will surely be going back to do that again. Ben Rhodes, who served as President Obama's Deputy National Security Advisor and speechwriter, will join us next. On the night James Tallarico won Texas Democratic nomination for the United States Senate, he said this.
There is something happening in Texas. The people of this state have given this country a little bit of hope. And a little bit of hope is a dangerous thing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what happens in this Republican runoff. We already know who we're running against. The billionaire mega donors and their corrupt political system. Not any one politician, not any one political party. We are running against the broken system and the powerful people who broke it.
President Barack Obama recently campaigned with James Tallarico in Texas.
When I was a student here at the University of Texas, I registered voters for the campaign of then Senator Barack Obama.
Now I'm here at UT campaigning to send James Tallarico to the United States Senate. He's building a movement by bringing neighbors together. In this era of division, a new politics is being born right here in Texas.
Ben Rhodes, an Obama speechwriter and former Deputy National Security Advisor, has published a new book titled All We Say: The Battle for American Identity, A History in 15 Speeches. The 15 extraordinary speeches include, of course, presidential speeches and speeches for Martin Luther King Jr. and Benjamin Franklin, as well as a 1966 speech on the steps of the California State Capitol by Dolores Huerta, one of the leaders of the National Farm Workers who were protesting the exploitation of farm workers in California and around the country. Dolores Huerta, who today, at age 96, is still an activist, leader, and at times a protester, said in that speech 60 years ago, "The social and economic revolution of the farm workers is well underway, and it will not be stopped until we receive equality. The farm workers are moving. Nothing is going to stop them. The workers are crying for organization, and we are going to organize them. We may act in strange and unusual ways in our organizing, but we're willing to try new and unused methods to achieve justice for the farm workers." In his book, Ben Rhodes writes, "By the time I went to work for a Democratic presidential candidate, Barack Obama's rallying cry was, 'Yes, we can,' a direct quote of the slogan that Dolores Huerta had coined for the farm workers decades ago. Si se puede." Joining us now is Ben Rhodes, former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Obama and MS Now political and national security analyst. His new book is All We Say: The Battle for American Identity, A History in 15 Speeches. It is published today. Ben, thank you very much for joining us tonight. So struck by so much in your book, and you're writing about inspirational speakers, and in your New York Times piece about this, you've linked James Tallarico into this group of inspirational speakers who have really moved the way we see things and changed the way we see things.
Yeah, Lawrence, I think there are a couple things to this. First of all, we're so trapped in the present with Donald Trump. We're so trapped in the day-to-day drama that we can forget that we exist in a continuum. The reason I went into history in 250 years is because you find those connective threads that so often live on through speeches, as I pointed out in the synergy between Dolores Huerta's activism and Barack Obama's campaign. But also, more importantly, when you go back and you look at how the best people have done it, there's a moral language that they use. It's not just about policy. That's important. It's incredibly important. But the policy has to flow from what your moral vision for this country and its identity is. FDR, just to take a few people in my book, FDR didn't just talk about a program. He talked about 4 fundamental freedoms that defined America. Martin Luther King did not just talk about the need to dismantle segregation. He talked about his dream of a multiracial America where black children and white children could be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. Barack Obama talked about, I am my brother's keeper. I am my sister's keeper. These are ideals and values that then inform the policy vision that they have. And I think one thing that Democrats have kind of lost in this Trump era is we're so angry about Trump, or we're trying to find the right formulation about middle-class economics, that we forget to make it about something bigger. Politics at its best, particularly in the Democratic Party, is about something bigger. And so when I hear James Tallarico on the stump talking about how his Christian faith compels him to care for his neighbor, or even talking to you, Lawrence, about values of integrity and service and honesty, those are things that people of different political persuasions can get behind, and they're things that we badly, badly need to counter-program what Donald Trump is doing to this nation.
You know, I think when people think, oh, it's a book about a collection of speeches, well, it's a lot more than that, because you give us an awful lot of your own written analysis about it in addition to the speeches. But they are just not the speeches you expect. I sort of had in my head an expectation of what these speeches would be. It's not what they are. One thing that I find that does link them, and by the way, totally fascinated by the linking threads of a 1966 speech by Dolores Huerta to Barack Obama in the 21st century. There's a lot of that in the book, because all of these speakers are optimists. That's the one thing that they all share in their time. Benjamin Franklin, an optimist for this country. Martin Luther King, a realist, knowing how hard the battle was that he was in, but always an optimist. Dolores Huerta, always an optimist. To this day, an optimist. And these are people who knew they were in very long-term struggles. They knew they weren't going to have a victory in a couple of months that was going to settle things and they could relax.
That's right, and thank you for pointing that out. It's not an anthology. In each chapter, what I do is I describe the distinct circumstances that produced these words. What was the life story of the person that allowed them to give that speech? Importantly, what movement did they either come out of or did they build in order to deliver that speech? And I think there's something very specifically American, Lawrence, about that idea of what you just spoke about, to really persuade people, right? Because the best speeches, the most consequential ones, they either mobilize and persuade. To do that, you're not just telling people what you believe, you're telling people why you believe it. And you're asking them to take a chance on hope. You're asking them to believe in a future vision that might seem really hard to attain. I mean, Frederick Douglass, at the height of slavery, speaking about a multiracial future of abolition and multiracial democracy. That is someone literally trying to speak history into being, knowing that he's not going to see the full fulfillment of his vision, in the same way that King was not going to see the full fulfillment of his dream. In the same way that Dolores Huerta, on the steps of that Capitol, didn't just talk about collective bargaining rights and the workers' agenda. She said, we are here. We had marched from Delano, California, all the way to Sacramento, hundreds of miles. And she's standing there and says, we embody our needs to you. We demand to be seen. Is what she's saying. And I had Ronald Reagan, too, who also spoke his way into the presidency and built a movement in similar ways. So you can do this from different ideological persuasions. We need to get back to that kind of storytelling, political storytelling. And I see it in people like Tallarico, John Ossoff, even Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Some of the younger Democrats are kind of beginning to find a language that looks beyond Donald Trump. And I think they will be benefited by looking back and seeing how people have done this in the past, because they're taking the baton from some giants who were activists and politicians before them. Yeah, and one of the characteristics of the people in this book with these speeches is that they all know or knew who they are. They didn't have to find out what to say from someone walking in with talking points. That's not the way it worked for Franklin Roosevelt. These are people who, you know, obviously Ronald Reagan had speechwriters, but he also had core beliefs that were very clear that began before he became a political candidate. And that's true of all the people that you write about and the people you've written about in the Times. Who are in the present day practice of this. They're all people who seem to wake up in the morning knowing who they are, and they don't need the speechwriters to tell them. They knew what they believed. I mean, FDR was just extraordinary to spend time with him. And, you know, the Four Freedoms speech was delivered in 1941. He'd just been reelected. It's the darkest hour. Germany has conquered France. The war looks bad. He's got to convince an isolationist Congress to provide a blank check of support to Britain and probably to get in the war. He had a draft of his speech. Something was missing. He called in the speechwriters the night before and he said, I have an idea for an ending. I want to go with this concept of four freedoms. What is this? Because it's not enough to tell people what my program is. I have to tell them why they have to make sacrifices, what this nation is all about. He knew intuitively what it was, and he spoke that into being. Ben Rhodes' wonderful new book is All We Say, The Battle for American Identity, A History in 15 Speeches. Ben, thank you very much for joining us tonight.